Welcome into Cornhusker Connection. I'm Brandon Shanahan, joined by Tyler Sprinkel, Brooke Byrne. Bookie Brooke will be here in shortly to rehash what was a very upsetting weekend. Bad time for the boys. Real quick, if you're here, if you're sad, if you're doing a victory lap in our sorrow, like the video, subscribe. Costs you nothing. It helps us out a ton. Also, even if you hate us, let us know. YouTube doesn't know. You could call us a piece of shit in the comments. That's fine. It helps the algo. But yeah, Saturday was a rough one. I think as rough as it's. I mean, we'll get into this later, but as rough as it's been for a long time.
Yeah, very, very, very brutal. Very brutal.
Start to finish, just a
Yeah.
good old fashioned ass whooping, and in a stage where it felt like it was a good opportunity for us to exercise some demons, beat a ranked team on the road, win a national broadcast game, when it's not against a wannabe rap star and Shadur Sanders. That would have been nice one time, but
I love that you're
we are where
still
we are.
throwing shots, even though we just got shit pumped. I love it.
I was on our Big 12 show, and I was talking about the fans throwing garbage on the field in the Texas game, and it reminded me of Iowa throwing garbage on the field after that punt was called back against Minnesota. So I got a deep bag when it comes to hating, and Shadur Sanders is top of that list. But initial thoughts from Saturday?
Not good. I know we all knew that it was going to be a hard game to win. But I think we are all secretly just, let's not get embarrassed. Let's not play like shit. And we ended up doing both those things, playing like shit and getting embarrassed. I want to make all these excuses just to make myself feel better. But at some point, you do kind of got to look in the mirror and realize that there are some problems on the team. People calling for Matt Rule and stuff, I don't understand that. And then you look at people like Kurt Signetti. Oh, he did it in 1 year. Yeah, but he took all of his players, guys that he already knew. He was in college football last year. Matt Rule, when he came here, was not, clearly. Again, it sounds like I'm making mistakes, but there are two different paths that they took. Obviously, Kurt Signetti, that was the better path to take. But I think he just struck fire in the players that he brought over, because they weren't big names, they weren't huge recruits. They were like 1, 2, 3 star guys that just came over and played their ass off, and they're continuing to do so. That's a damn good football team. I'm glad that they were able to shut a lot of people up, because watching them, they don't deserve the hate that they were getting. Well, you played UCLA, you played this person, you played that person. But it sucks. Yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah. Oh boy, it was one of those weekend ruiners where nothing felt good afterwards. I mean, I had the house myself, so I got some pepperoni pizza to eat my feelings out in, some beaver nuggets from Bussey's, and just nothing helped the pain. So empty, and yeah, for everything that you mentioned, there's an extra layer of pain, one on the margin, and the margin of everything. Everything looked bad. Offense looked bad. Special teams, oddly enough, looked on par, which is derogatory, and then defense looked awful too, which I had hoped that we had gotten figured out from the Illinois game. And it's just one of those losses that I didn't expect with Matt Rule as the coach. Like we talk about toughness, and now you have examples where you get out toughed, whether it's Michigan from last year or Illinois from earlier this year. And, Matt Rule comes out of those games talking about like, well, this is, the kind of game that lights a fire under our ass. And it's just, we're still here. And it is that extra layer that like Kurt Signetti got in there and took a 3-9 Indiana team to 7-0 top 15 team at the end of October. Now it's different, and I don't think it does anybody any good to be like, well, they're doing it differently and it's working out for them. I guess that stuff, and I also had that same thought about Colorado last year after that Colorado game. Like, well, freaking Deion Sanders can turn this around. so quickly, and that's gone up and down since then. But I think, hi Sophia, I think you just got to look at the team like I said, in the mirror. Hopefully this is the game that lights the fire underneath them. I don't know if it is, because I thought this about the Illinois game. I thought this about the Michigan game last year. I just don't know what the solution is.
I see what you're saying about the Michigan game last year, but that was a different team, not a very good one. It just is. It was what it was. This year, we have the pieces that you should be able to work with. That's tough, and I don't know the exact numbers. But Cignetti completely flipped that roster, similarly to what Deion Sanders did. I mean, I don't know how many players Cignetti kept. I don't know the numbers on how many players Rule kept when he got here, but I feel like it was a decent amount of players that we kept here. And he talks a lot about the culture, and you heard it after the game. I forget who said it. Was it Jamari Butler? Like, you could just feel everybody just down, instead of continuing to want to fight. So that's just a mindset thing, a culture thing. And those things don't get flipped overnight. I mean, it's easy when you're winning. Everything's roses when you're winning. But when you lose, and when you lose this bad, everything is put under a microscope and things get a lot bigger. I do still believe in the team. I'm still going to be sitting up here saying we're going to beat the hell out of Ohio State. That's not going to change. This one just tough. And you mentioned it's a weekend ruiner. After the game, so I have two TVs in my basement. We had a 4-box on the other TV, and Brooke and I just started watching horror movies. That's how bad it was.
That's so funny, because that's exactly the energy here. I love college football. It's my favorite thing in the entire world. Mm-hmm. And I'm good. Like, I had the Texas Georgia game on in the background. I'm good.
Yeah. It wasn't, I didn't want any part of any other games. And it sucked because this was supposed to be the best weekend. Some games turned out to be that way. Some games, like that Texas game, wasn't really.
The Iowa game was pretty fun to watch.
Game. What's that?
The Iowa Michigan State game was pretty fun, I thought.
That one was fun. Always dancing on the grave, Brandon Shanahan. The other game, the Tennessee Alabama game, was pretty good. Yeah, just completely ruined the weekend, like you said.
Where does this game rank in worst losses as a fan of recent?
Like recently, like the past 10 years, or
I guess of your conscious life, because I mean, we're not that old.
Yeah.
I guess the first ones that come to mind is that I've seen people brought up is the 70 burger by Kansas. That was embarrassing. I mean, I was in elementary school, so I had other shit to do. But I think that's different in the light that was the end of something. Like, this is still supposed to be the cascade. Yeah. I also think about, I mean, there's a couple of embarrassing games, like the Wisconsin Big Ten championship game that had hope for the Michigan blowout from last year. Like, I didn't have a whole lot of hope, but still embarrassing to get stomped on like that. But this one, it was different because we had hope going into it. So those are the first major blowouts that come to my mind. Which is that category.
I'm surprised you didn't mention. I guess you were just specifically talking blowouts, but the Texas Big 12 championship game.
That was another one. That was the first. I think that was the first football game where I shed a tear.
I think that's number one. I think, I don't know. It's hard to. I think it would be top 15. It wouldn't be top 10.
That feels appropriate.
But and I'm gonna do something different from what I normally do. I'm looking at it this way. I am pleased that we are in a position to feel so shitty about this loss, because that means things are changing in Nebraska. That's the way I'm going to view it, or choose to look at it. Because like I said last year, when we got blown out by Michigan, I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah,
So that's the way I'm going to look at it, because if I don't, then why am I even watching the games?
Yeah. I guess my my view on that is that it's nice to like care about something, like have. I mean, because it's not just us who had hope about this Nebraska team. Like they were ranked at one point this year. They were knocking on the doors to be getting ranked. By the way, they're still getting a vote in the AP poll, which is very silly.
That's great.
Um, but like so we're not delusional here. But to have an administration in a program that cares as much as we do, that's something. That's something because I mean, you look at there's what 70 Power Four schools. Boy, there's got to be half of them that just don't give a shit about anything. Like maybe
Yeah.
another 10 that they'll like Kansas that they fell ass backwards in a landslide poll and Jalen Daniels. Great, they'll lean into that, but they're not competing for championships by any stretch of the imagination. So that's very nice, and that's a good silver lining. Is that if it hurts that bad, then it still means something. I mean, I felt there have been losses the last 5 or 7 years when it hasn't looked this good. That still sting, but I'm picking up what you're throwing down.
Yeah, and I do also want to point out the silver lining where we did flip a pretty big commit yesterday.
That was pretty cool.
Um, so the fact that people are still buying into the vision makes me feel a lot better. So I guess that was the bright spot of the weekend for sports.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And I was just kind of looking ahead because I do think that there's still a lot of good. I think feel like this is the kind of game to kind of reset expectations. Like, I mean, we had somebody on the show, I won't name who, said that we're going to go 11-1. So, I mean, shockingly not here today. So that is what it is. But overall, a lot of good can still be had. And specifically with a loss like this, like 7-5, I think would still feel pretty good.
Yeah, and we weren't going into this year saying we're going to make it to the Big Ten championship game, we're going to make it to the playoffs. Um, Obviously, we had hopes and dreams for that, but realistically, we were thinking, 8-4, 7-5. That's still on the table, because USC doesn't look very as great as they seemingly did at the beginning of the season. UCLA is still not very good. Wisconsin does look good,
They're
so
getting
that
better.
could be a toss-up. And then Iowa's just Iowa every year. It's just a dogfight. So we'll see. I mean, still only 2 losses. I think this does feel better if we don't lose to Illinois at home. And that was our first loss of the season. I think you're better able to spin zone it into that hurt really bad, but the sky's not falling. But I think with the fan base seeing 2 losses, kind of flips everything on their heads. Also, I feel like if we go into that game ranked, then the mindset of everybody is just different, which that shouldn't be the case. But psychologically, I could see that happening for a lot of the players.
Yeah, that's a good point. It probably does change things a little bit, but
Maybe not make up 49 points difference, but maybe some things go differently. I don't know.
well, and also the margin is I think the margin. You look at that team, you look at 49 points, you think, well, one team's just playing a different sport than the other. I don't think that's necessarily true, just because of how you look at the game unfolding. Nebraska fell behind early, but then it got to a point where, like, okay, well, they're down 2 or 3 scores. You got to start airing it out. Just got to start taking chances. I mean, getting 3 yards of carry isn't gonna fix this anymore. And then Indiana's able to convert on some of those mistakes, and then it just gets ugly from there. It doesn't feel like the margin between those two teams are that wide, wider than I could have ever imagined. But
Yeah.
I guess if it does, at the end of the day, just counts as one loss. As bad as it is, as bad as it felt, I mean, still everything that we realistically had is still in front of us, and now we just got to win a couple of games that maybe we didn't foresee at the beginning of the year. USC, as you mentioned, is a prime opportunity for that. Iowa might. There also, fun fact about Iowa: this loss dropped Kirk Ferentz under 60% winning percentage. So
No.
couple more games like this, maybe he gets the boot, doesn't get in the College Football Hall of Fame, which would be great because it should reward mediocrity. I'm on my soapbox. I'm going to step back for a little bit. But
Maybe this is
still,
just karma for you talking shit to everybody for so long. Maybe it's just karma.
boy, if that's it, then Nebraska's never going to a bowl game again. Caitlin Clark's going to win 100 WNBA championships. Utah's going to win the Big 12 in the next 4 years. I mean, the generational hate run will absolutely catch up. The Chiefs are going. Well, I mean, the Chiefs are already winning all those Super Bowls. You know what?
Yeah,
Maybe you're onto something. Maybe you're onto
yeah.
something.
Maybe it's
Every
you.
team that I hate is just all right. I'm going to change that approach here. Not today.
Maybe we maybe
We'll
we
get
have to sacrifice you.
there. Yeah.
We gotta draw and quarter you and just hang you from the rafters.
I mean, I was thinking just like hey, say some nice things about Iowa every now.
No.
But
It's
I don't.
gotta be drastic.
We got a lot to make up for. That's
Yeah.
fair.
Years and years of just spewing disgusting hate.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You know what? Like if I were in front of like a jury of my peers and they're like, "Is this pretty fucked up?" I'd be like, "All right, I guess you're onto something." That's fair.
Yeah, man. It's on you.
Where so there are a lot of there's a lot of jibber jabber about making coaching changes. As you alluded to, and anybody talking about Matt Rule being on the chopping block is out of their mind.
Silly.
That's so silly. But there are a couple of guys who do have fair cases to be held accountable, and that's Ed Foley, of course, who's been on this trajectory for an entire season pretty much, and then Marcus Satterfield, who I've defended, I think, as much as anybody throughout this process. But I'll admit I think I overlooked a lot coming after this season because I watched Saturday. I'm like, okay, I see what everybody else has been saying. This shouldn't look this bad or this discombobulated.
Yeah. I saw somebody say today that we're not playing as a group. We're playing as offensive line, quarterback, wide receivers, running backs, tight ends. We're not playing as an offense. We're playing as different groups on the field at the same time, if that makes sense. And maybe just saying that doesn't make sense to you, but after you watch the game, you're like, yeah, nobody really, they don't gel very well. It seems choppy and just not fluid. And I don't think that the blame should fall solely on Satterfield. But as the leader of that group, there's some blame to be had there.
I think so. I think by nature, the tenacity of this fan base is that they're always trying to fire somebody. And obviously Marcus Satterfield didn't do a good job last year. And I give him quite a bit of a pass when you have Arizona State backup quarterback Jeff Sims and
Starting quarterback.
due to injury, nobody wants him out there, not even Arizona State.
Starting quarterback.
And then Nevada backup quarterback Chuba Purdy as two of your three guys. That's a tough spot. At best, all three of those guys are very limited. Even my guy Heisman Harburg, very limited at best. And the rest of the offense just decimated by injuries. Whatever. I feel like that's a fair pass. This year's a different story. You get to go out and handpick your top two wide receivers in Isaiah Nair and Jamal Banks. Offensive line's back and ready to take a huge step up. You get this flashy freshman quarterback in Dylan Raiola. 4 running backs with significant experience. Thomas Fidone back. It feels like this is the kind of roster that unlocks an offensive coordinator that's good. And I haven't seen that much. I've seen a couple of wrinkles that have been fun and that have been high IQ, but for the most part, they've not been able to get into a rhythm through 7 games. I mean, they've had their shot plays every here and there and have scored some points in some games, but no rhythm whatsoever.
Yeah, and it feels like we do kind of run the same 10 plays over and over and over again. That's not great. That's not great going up against Big Ten defenses. They can pick up on that, and then you're just stuck.
Well, that would absolutely explain why things that were working in September are not working in October anymore. Is well, if you just keep going back to the well, like I've seen one major adjustment where I think it was the Rutgers game, or even a couple games before that, they loved that jet sweep to Ja'Cory Barney. The next week they did a fake to Ja'Cory Barney. Congratulations, but they're not. That's a good point. They're not developing. They're not adapting and evolving.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it works in some conferences. I'm sure you can keep doing that because you can just talent a lot of the teams. But that's not the case in the Big Ten.
I mean, in the SEC, you could probably get away with those defensive slugfests because none of those teams have a good quarterback, but not in the Big Ten.
Not in the Big Ten.
The running back room is also disappointing to me. Dante Dowdell looked good to start off the game. I thought he was getting some good burst. And then that fumble, it's just like, all right, now we can't see Dante anymore. And now it's the gap between him and the rest of the running backs isn't big enough to warrant turnovers. And then the other backs get in and like they're just not doing anything either.
Yeah.
Like it seems like the whole season the team has wanted one guy to step up and be the guy. And now we're 7 games in and still nada.
Yeah, and then it quickly became where you absolutely have to just throw the ball every down because we're down so much we can't stop them. So that doesn't help the running back room either. I feel like that position is a lot of get your reps, get the feel of the game, then you start figuring it out. So we just weren't able to really do that very efficiently.
And then I think the most disappointing part of that, because I know the special teams are bad. I know I've seen the offense struggle to find a rhythm. But this defense, I was told coming into the season was going to be a top 15 defense. I saw them kind of get exposed for a couple weeks and then batten down the hatches, make some good adjustments. And then I seen them as worse as I think I've ever seen them. They were gashing him up. Curtis O'Rourke had one hand and he was still dicing up Nebraska. Like I don't know what's going on with the defense. It just doesn't seem like anybody is significantly better than their offensive counterpart.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like in these games, Ty and Nash just disappear, which that can't happen, especially the way that they were running the ball. Like these two guys came back for a reason, and you're getting outworked heavily on that defensive line. I don't think that we can talk about them being an elite defense anymore. I think that's off the table. Sure, they can turn it around and still be a pretty good defense, but the elite defense, I think that conversation's off the table. You get 49, or how many points they even end up scoring?
56, 50 burger.
Yeah. Yeah. If you get 56 put up on your head, I don't think you can be considered an elite anymore.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I mean, I think, and now that you mention it, it kind of seems like the offense a little bit. There's a lot of great individuals. Like I think Ty and Nash are gonna be playing on Sundays next year. They're gonna be awesome. Tommy Hill, I know he's a bit banged up, but he's gonna be awesome at the next level. But it just doesn't seem. It seems like that defensive line is getting schemed out, which I saw against Illinois, and I thought would be addressed. But it doesn't seem like that. And I don't know if it's because they don't trust their defensive backs to win one-on-ones or what the issue is, if they're just trying to be too conservative, which I guess works most of the time. Like when you're playing Hudson Carr, like, all right, well, you got to complete 10 passes on this drive if you're going to score a touchdown. Meanwhile, Luke Altmaier and Curtis Rourke are like, yeah, okay, easy breezy.
Yeah.
See ya. But I don't know what the solution is. I guess on the bright side, I mean, obviously Ohio State's a different beast, but Miller Moss is probably in the same category. But like Wisconsin, UCLA, and Iowa aren't going to have quarterbacks that can do what Rourke and Altmaier did. But there's still a very, very low ceiling on this defense, I think.
Yeah.
Or very low floor, I should say.
I do want to give Rourke flowers too, because man, he was out there diming the ball Like,
Yeah.
just putting it in the perfect spots, especially those back shoulder throws, like, damn, he was out there just diming. So I do wanna give him his flowers because a lot of those completions, it's just that was a perfect throw.
Yeah.
That was still really good defense, but that was just a perfect throw. You put it the only place that you could to make that a completion, and he was putting it there. So pretty impressive by him.
A bit nitpicky here. I thought it was interesting that defensively they went with Tommy Hill and Buford instead of Sayer Wright on the field. Um, and this is always something I just default to the coaches to, but I just thought that was an interesting way to start the game.
I see why. I get why that would be the case because Buford is a leader of that team, and you want your leader out there on the field as much as possible. So I get it in that aspect, but you're talent wise, you're completely right. Like it doesn't make sense for that to be the case.
And just, I don't know, kind of going to the hot hand. And Sayer Wright's been playing out of his mind. I just wish, and there's only 11 guys that can go on the field unless you're Oregon down the stretch. But I think you got to find a way to get those guys out there, even if that
Yeah,
means that you give up a backer. Is there a backer like linebacker number 3 as good as Sayer Wright or as valuable?
it depends on what they're doing, I guess.
Yeah,
If they're running the ball, then I would take the backer. But if they're throwing, then yeah, obviously keep Sayer out there. I just don't think that you can't just say, "Oh, this is what we're doing" without knowing the game plan of the other team.
yeah. I think you're right. And I mean, that's not something where I'm like, well, no, if I was the defensive coordinator, I would have
Right.
started saying, you're right, we would have won the game. I just thought that was interesting. And that's something that we had talked about last week, too, is how do you manage Tommy Hill coming back? And also, because I think early on the thought process was, well, okay, well, you kind of cycle Hartzog out. Hartzog's been playing great the last couple of weeks. I really like him. So you can't easily take him off the field, but tough stuff. Any final thoughts on the Indiana game?
Well, just the last thing on what we were just talking about. As much as I like Gifford, and the energy that he brings, I do think that he kind of hinders the defense a little bit in the fact that he is essentially like the Troy Polamalu. And stick with me here, okay? He's a Troy Polamalu of our defense where he's just allowed to do whatever he's seeing. He's not set anywhere. Does that make sense? Like he's not
Yeah,
in charge of taking that deep zone. He's not in charge of, covering the middle of the field. He just if he's seeing something, then he's just supposed to react. Same way that Troy Polamalu was in that defense. Um, so I don't know if that helps or hinders us, but I don't think it helps very much.
I have to imagine that's the sense where maybe like his eyes and his IQ are more valuable than his physical skill set. Where it's like if he plays where we need him to play, he's less likely to make a play than like if he sees something that we
Sure.
can't look into the future on. But I mean, it hasn't been great. So I mean, I'm not gonna fight you too
Yeah.
much there.
Like if he's seeing something that's not there though, then
Then it's a
that's
disaster.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
I think he's a fine football player. His leadership is invaluable. Um, I don't know. I just don't think I would trust a college player to do that often.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I guess the last thing I wanted to hit on, especially as far as like firing coaches, obviously, I don't think it helps much. I think
Yeah,
almost always, like unless like Oklahoma fired their offensive coordinator, I get it. Um, Utah fired their offensive or he stepped down, I get it. But a 5-2 team that's still kind of in the thick of where they want to be. Does that need to get evaluated in the offseason? Absolutely. Which I think should be happening every year anyways. But Rule's been big on preaching consistency with these football players. It would seem kind of hypocritical for him to be like, hey, you guys need to be consistent, but we're going to also make this giant change 60% of the way through the season.
yeah. But if it's not working, it's not working. I mean, I'd get if he was oh, well, we're always going to have, a top 30 offense. Oh, obviously we want to be up in the top 10, but top 30, like we're just okay. We're bad on offense. We're not good. Does
Right.
that make sense?
And yeah, and I mean, there's a certain level where like accountability has to come into play. And I get that, and maybe we do get to that point this year, unfortunately, because I don't. As much as I'm saying I don't think now is the time to fire Satterfield, I also don't think it's going to get any better. But you also got to look at alternatives. Do you have a plan like Brock Glenn, or whoever they brought in a quarterback coach? He hasn't called plays in like 15 years. I don't think that he's a good solution.
Well, maybe
Um,
that's a good thing actually, because then the tape that you have on him is so old, like, you know.
I guess, yeah. I mean, and there is a world where it's just a fresh voice or like a
Yeah.
fresh set of ideas. So I don't think now is the time to do that. Same thing with Ed Foley. As horrible as the offense special teams is, and I don't know how much of that is coaching. I'm very curious because
Yeah.
I've never seen
Think
a fan base call for the head of a special teams guy like I've seen Nebraska Fred Foley. Now, granted, I've also never seen a special teams unit as bad as Nebraska's this year, but
Yeah, when the players are just dropping the ball on kickoffs and stuff, like I don't necessarily think that that's on Ed Foley, but there are a lot of other areas that he does have his hands in that are not very good.
oh man, I'm glad that we don't have to talk about this game ever again. That was awful.
Yep. Flush it down the drain, on to the next.